to everybody for the first webinar of a series on fit testing. We keep the webinars short to half an hour, but Janina will explain a bit more in a second. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to use the Q&A. But maybe Janina, if you can go. Yeah. So the practical things. So the audience, you are muted and video is out automatically as we are in a webinar setting. But if at some point we have the feeling that one of you needs to be able to speak to explain maybe a question that you have in Q&A, we can allow your micro to unmute and even put on your video. So, but then it's so that will be done. Questions very welcome in the Q&A feature. So that you know, and that's also one of the reasons why you are on mute and without video. The webinar is being recorded and will be made available on the ESF YouTube channel afterwards. That will also be additionally shared, the link with you after the webinar. Next slide. So for those who would not know ESF, but I will be very brief. So we are the Federation of Suppliers of Personal Protective Equipment on European level. And we do have one of our working groups is a working group on respiratory protection. And maybe you can go to the next slide. Where that working group is preparing the series of webinars. We have two speakers today. That is Janina Sander, who is actually the chair of our working group Respiratory Protection at ESF. And she is employed by TSI. And our second speaker is Stephanie Lynch, who is at the moment also president of the International Society of Respiratory Protection. Thank you specifically for you, Stephanie, because it's very early morning because she's based in the US. So, and very sorry to have you woke up a bit earlier than necessary because of the hiccup with the link. And with that, I pass the word to Janina to introduce the specific webinar and start your presentation. And I see in the meantime, we have more people attending, so that looks good.
Yeah, indeed, you're giving over to Stephanie first.
Yes,
okay.
Thank you. But that was great, Henk. And yes, I'm really thrilled to be here. I do miss living in Europe, and especially right at this very moment. It's so early here. But the ESF is hoping to reach respiratory protection end users, right? That's our ultimate goal, either live or with these recordings for this series, to teach the importance of respirator fit testing. Today, we're going to start with some basics about respiratory protection. So we're going to cover the different categories of respiratory protection, the basic importance of fit and fit testing, and the benefits of offering different models, sizes, and styles. And then we're going to leave a little bit of time for questions. So now I will officially hand it over to Janina.
Yes, thank you, Stephanie. And yeah, you see on the screen currently the picture you all see with the invitation to this webinar. And we put the question, did you know about, because today when we talk about the categories of respiratory protection and the importance of fit, we of course need to talk about fit. And this means that you should never wear a tight-fitting respirator with facial hair, because facial hair in the end is nothing else than something that makes your mask unfitting because it's, hindering to have a good seal between mask and face. So I know that lots of you spotted this mistake in the picture and answered already to our invitation, hey, there's a mistake in the pictures. And that's great because that means you already know something. And for those who did not recognize this before, we hope that, with this webinar today and our whole webinar series, we can make it quite clear to you why never wear a tight-fitting respirator with facial hair. Okay, so let's start with the categories of respiratory protection. The group of respiratory protective device is a quite big one, and a first separation can be made between filtering or air purifying respirators and air supplying respirators. The filtering and air purifying respirators can then split it up again into the air purifying respirators, which are only air purifying and therefore so-called negative pressure masks. And on the other side, the powered air purifying respirators or PAPRs, which are dealing with positive pressure. On the air supplying side, we can also again split up into two different subcategories, the supplied air respirators and the self-contained breathing apparatus, SCBAs, as you might heard about, which all deal in positive pressure. So we will show the different groups later on, but you can also see here that we have 4 different groups on the bottom, and 3 of them have the same characteristic as being positive pressure, while only one category on the left side is negative pressure mode. This is one way to show the differences in the respiratory protective devices. There's another way you can split this big group of respiratory protective devices with the respiratory interfaces being used. So really the mask sitting on your face. Is it a tight-fitting mask? So is it really tight-fitting, creating a seal? Then it can be a full face mask, it could be a half face, or a quarter face mask, and also filtering face pieces are tight-fitting respirators. And on the other side, a bit smaller category are the loose-fitting devices with helmets or hoods used, which do not rely on tight fit. If we now combine these 2 different ways of separation, let's take a look at the air purifying respirators. So on the first category tree, we had the very left side, so where we only have filtering of the air. And this is exactly why they are called air purifying respirators, because you have an ambient air with lots of hazardous in there, which is then going through a filter and comes out as a cleaner inhalation air. What is quite important here is that this is not a perfectly clean air. The filter decides how much cleaner the air will be, that it will never be at 100% clean, because it can just, the filter reduces for a specific ratio. But of course, depending on how much hazards are out there and the specific filter efficiency, the ratio of how much is cleaned out, it depends how clean really your inhalation air is. These air purifying respirators are available in the so-called negative pressure mode as tight-fitting mask, as FFPs, full face, half face mask, but always tight-fitting. And this is due to the reason why they are called negative pressure respirator. They are negative pressure respirators because we have ambient pressure on the ambient air side, and then when breathing through a filter, we have a pressure loss. That's just simple physics of how a filter works, and therefore we do have a negative pressure on this other side of the mask, of the filter, so inside the mask. And this is why air purifying respirators are negative pressure ones, and therefore they always need to be tight-fitting masks so that we are really breathing through the filter and not around. And on the other hand, you can have powered air purifying respirators. So that means that you have a pump that soaks in the ambient air and soaks it through a filter and then provides it into the mask, which means it's a positive pressure if you just look at the mask. And therefore, this is available in both options as a tight-fitting positive pressure device, or in a loose fitting way, like with this hood. So in both ways, it's a powered positive pressure air purifying respirator, but with the different options, loose fitting or tight fitting. Now we take a look at the so applied air respirators, so the right part of the first tree, we do have everything that means we get a fresh air supplied. So we are not using and filtering the ambient hazardous air, but we are directly isolated from that one and are getting fresh air supplied. And this can be in the supplied air respirators with a stationary inhalation air. So normally it's not a bottle standing somewhere, but like fixed line in your production hall where you just like connect yourself with a tube or your mask with a tube. In all cases, this is a positive pressure version, and it's available in both options with tight fitting devices or with loose fitting devices. And then the self-contained breathing apparatus, which are really, I take my bottle of fresh air with me on my back. So the things that you typically know from firefighters. And these things are also available in both versions, one with a tight-fitting mask and the other version with loose-fitting devices. And the tight-fitting respirators are, for example, often used if you really have the firefighter with a self-contained breathing apparatus, and the devices with are self-contained but working with loose-fitting hoods are, for example, used in rescue scenarios. So just as an example, of course, other scenarios are there as well. So you see, there is lots of different respiratory protective devices available and different options with air supply, without air supply, tight fitting or loose fitting. What is important is that as long as we, or as soon as we do have a tight fitting mask, we need to take care about the fit. And I show you this here on the example of a tight fitting negative pressure mask. So our FFP mask, our half face mask, or full face mask. Because if we have our well-fitting mask, we have our hazardous ambient air, we are breathing through the filter cleans our air, and we are safe. If we have a poor fitting mask, we have the hazardous ambient air, and due to this pressure loss and negative pressure scenario, we are not breathing through the filter anymore, or not as much as we would need. We are breathing around the filter through the leakages. And as we do have a negative pressure inside the mask, the air comes automatically through the leakages, and with our breathing, we just increase this scenario. So what we then see inside the mask is the same hazards as outside, as we should have been protected. So the very key point of negative pressure air purifying respirators is that filtration is our single protective function. And that we can have a good filtration, we do need, of course, a good filter quality, but we also do need the tight fit, that we are really using the filter and not breathing around it. It's a little bit different when we talk about all masks that are in the category of positive pressure ones. So the air purifying, positive powered air purifying respirators, or the ones with air supply, or also the self-contained breathing apparatus. When we have them in the tight fitting version, we again do need to take care about the fit. If we do have here on the left picture here, we do have our hazardous ambient air and our respirator, and we are supplied with cleaner air. And as long as the mask is well fitting and the air supply is working, it's all fine. But it could have leakages if it's not proper tight fitting. As long as the airflow is working properly, it's all fine again because we have the positive pressure and we might have leakages, but the air is going out. So we are still safe. But if for some reason our air supply is broken and we do not have a proper air supply into the mask, the positive pressure is reduced and we again breathe in through the leakages. So we then breathe in the hazardous substances again. Why can an air supply be broken? Because nothing is always 100%. Everything can get broken. If we have self-contained breathing apparatus, our air supply is very limited. So if we have, for example, leakages and we are still safe because we are in this case where we have enough air, we lose lots of air. So the air in the self-contained breathing apparatus is reducing much faster than expected. So faster we reach the point where there's not enough air supply. And then we have the bad situation of being exposed to hazards, even with wearing a respirator. So it's important that when we have positive pressure, tight-fitting respirators, the positive pressure is our first protective function. But with these types, we do have a backup. We do have the tight fit as second protection function. But to have this backup, we do need to have the tight fit. And with that, talking more about what means tight fit, I'm handing over to Stephanie.
Thank you, Janina. So like Janina was saying, air is always going to take the path of least resistance. So you may think as a respirator wearer that just because you don't feel large amounts of air leaking in, that maybe you don't have anything to worry about. But in this instance, we do need to kind of sweat the small stuff, right? So a single millimeter gap can let in all sorts of bad stuff. So in the graphic, you can see particulate matter that would fit through this gap, but consider gases and vapors also, right? Janina was just talking about firefighters, SCBA. At that point, if you are having leakage under positive pressure, so just losing bottle, right, losing your air, then that gives you less time to fight that fire. But so when you're concerned about contaminants in the surrounding air, you need to be concerned about funneling as much of that air possible through the filtering media, because like Janina mentioned, there's just a lot of factors going on here, right? The filter's not going to ever be fully 100%. And then every respirator leaks. It's just a matter of how much. So this is something we really do have to be concerned about. So the legal requirements here are a little general. So even though there's no overarching European mandate, more and more countries are starting to require fit testing. Some of the countries that require fit testing, it's going to be substance specific, which is a pretty weird concept because if you're going to acknowledge that, say, asbestos or silica is very dangerous and harmful to health and worth fit testing for, then you should go ahead and acknowledge that, all of the other substances that are dangerous, should be protected in the same way. But generally speaking, you are obligated to ensure that the PPE, so that would include your respirators, that your people are wearing, that it fits them correctly. So that is a directive. I think that does at least encourage some amount of fit testing, but I will say that just throughout the world, until it becomes regulated, you usually don't see a lot of fit testing. So on another side, you think you go out and you pick a respirator and it has the CE mark. And so you think, well, this is a good respirator and it's going to provide the protection that I need, right? But the CE marking is actually just where you start. It's not where you finish. So the CE mark is going to show that that respirator has passed some strict laboratory testing. That's going to have taken place on a standard head form. This is going to be with test subjects that have particular characteristics, and then it's going to sort out any test subjects who the respirator doesn't fit. None of the wearers that are in your space using the respirator out in the real world are going to have a face which obviously matches the shape of the European standard head form. We have the same issue in the States with head forms that we're using to evaluate respirators. But so that CE marking that's just meeting the requirements of a standard in a lab. And the single greatest uncontrolled variable in the whole scenario is a user's face. So obviously, our respirator wearers' faces don't have a CE mark. They're not going to match that European standard head form. We know how diverse our population is. All sorts of things can come up. Even, you actually typically, if you do fit testing, you're going to perform it at a regular interval, because we even understand that after a fit test, changes take place. People can have things happen with their face, weight gain, weight loss, scars, missing teeth, any sort of procedure on your face. I will say one thing we kind of see emerging now is the use of things like fillers and Botox that can change how that respirator seal is laying across your face. And then also just confirming the ability of people to don their respirator appropriately. If you're not someone who's using your respirator, every day, then that fit test can be a good check on that. So moving on to your fit test, that can help make sure that your protection is at its maximum. So one other aspect of this is just thinking, just how we said all these faces are very different. Also, respirators are very different. And I see a lot with, sort of unfortunately, where people want to protect their employees, but they're not well informed enough. And so they just go get one respirator in a particular size, and they just pretty much hand them out to their employees like, here, I'm trying to protect you, wear a respirator. Well, that's not going to work. Faces are very different, respirators are very different, and we want to do the fit testing. We want to have different respirator styles and sizes available. Obviously, these respirators are going to have to have been selected based on the hazards that you're facing, right? So they need to be appropriate for the hazard, but then you need to offer a selection of those appropriate respirators so that you can fit all the different faces of your workforce, because we do know that they're quite diverse. So that gets us to just fit testing basically. And so obviously this whole webinar series is focused on really promoting the benefit of fit testing. And this is the verification on whether a specific respirator that an individual has selected as being comfortable, that you've offered them a selection that they think fits. You're going to actually go through the process of testing that respirator to their face using an approved protocol, depending on which standard you're following, to make sure that it can create that tight fit. Janina mentioned over and over again, right, that tight fit is how you can ensure, especially with the negative pressure respirators, that you are getting that protection that you're expecting from your respirator that you selected, for your given hazard. So that fit test is that last sort of line of defense, really, in this whole process with your respirator. And doing regular fit testing can help promote people's trust in their equipment, right? If they sit there and they pass a fit test, they're going to have at least the knowledge that that respirator is capable of providing a particular amount of protection, and performing that regularly or with any changes is going to increase that confidence. We've seen nothing but good things with, if you go through the process of fit testing, it can help encourage a user to wear their respirator, especially if you involve them in that selection process and offered them some different respirators to choose from. So now I invite Janina back for the end. You were so good and remembered to turn off your camera and stuff. I forgot to do anything. It's early.
No, well, fine. I just thought about maybe the bandwidth with all the people. It might be helpful to not have too many video streams. But yeah, this was now our introduction, and I'm quite sure that there are lots of questions around fit testing open to you about more reasons for fit testing. How do I do fit testing? So Stephanie just mentioned there are some different protocols available around the globe. So, but how do I do fit testing at all? What are these protocols? All these questions we will take a look at in our second webinar, Fit Testing, Why and How. This will take place on March 20, and hopefully at that time we have a link that's working directly, so we can start at 11 a.m. So in this webinar, so we hope that today we could give you a good introduction to say, okay, fit testing is something we need to talk about because we know how a respirator works and that the fit is decisive and that the fit is something that's critical. And then in the second part, we want to talk about why to fit test, how to fit test, which method to select in which case, which protocol to follow in which country. So this is what we will take care about on March 20. And then we have a third episode on May 22, where we will take a more detailed look at the first method, which is qualitative fit testing. So it might sound currently a bit word for you, but when you listen to the second webinar in March 20, you will hear that there's qualitative fit testing as one method. And in May, we will then take a look at the process of qualitative fit testing and some important considerations to take when performing qualitative fit testing. So this will take place on May 22, again at 11 a.m. And then we're not finished, but we will have more to follow in July, September, and November, so through the whole year. And I was informed by Henk that the registration to this webinars will be available in a few days, and every one of you who registered for today will get an email with the registration links. And also, if you are on our LinkedIn channel or on our website, you will then see the official link to register for the second and the third part of the webinar. And with that, we hope that we made you interested in this whole topic and in our webinar series we will provide. And I think we are open for questions now.
Yeah, hopefully this means of offering it in little bite-sized chunks will help it be a little more digestible. I think that's the goal.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Janina and Stephanie. I don't see any questions in the Q&A, but I'm sure there will be a lot more in the next sessions. Indeed, if you go more in detail than the very general overview.
I did see a couple of questions, Henk, or something's popping up, but I don't. It's not in the.
Yeah, I
see something in the chat. One and a question is, so yes, I will also make sure that the YouTube channel link and so on will be shared in the email. There will be also a link from our website to the videos. So don't worry, you will be able to find the information without a problem. And then I see a question.
For those who are still joining, I already put the YouTube channel link into the chat. It's currently empty because we are still recording this one, but yeah, you will see the content later on.
I see the one question from Michelle about whether or not we're going to discuss the different APFs applied in different countries. I don't know if we've nailed down specifically that we were going to discuss that. I think it's a good idea. we might want to touch on. It is a really confusing concept that a respirator can have a different assigned protection factor depending on where you're using it, right? So I imagine we would at least touch on that, but I don't think that we've ironed out that we would discuss that very in depth.
Well, not really, to be honest, because so there might be one or two side sentences covering that. But as Stephanie said, it's a weird concept and no one really understands. So when we talk about fit testing and the importance of fit testing for tight-fitting respirators, there is no difference. So between the APFs are important when talking about which type of respirators can be used with which methods. But this is globally the same. So again, another reason why we don't understand the different APFs. And to be honest, we simply wouldn't know what to say half an hour instead of saying we don't understand this concept. So, but I think on not within ESF, but on the ISRP side, Stephanie, this is an ongoing discussion you have. And I know that the UK HSE is also, I'm not sure if they really started a project, but at least there were some talks about the history of APFs, why they are what they are. But as we don't have the answers to it, there's not that much to say, and we can just say we agree that this is strange.
Well, and if I will do a shameless plug, if you're not already and you're interested enough in respiratory protection to have joined this webinar, then please do consider joining the ISRP, so the International Society of Respiratory Protection. We need bodies, and we do want to develop materials to address things like the different APFs in different countries. I mean, ideally, we would like to get things much more aligned globally, and that is one of the missions of the ISRP.
Thank you. And I'm sure that if there would be more information or progress being made by the end of the series of these webinars, for instance, you will gladly share, of course, with the audience at later stages. Yeah, I see also Mike responding that there are papers on the ISRP website on that, including some covering the history.
Also
APFs.
including a paper I wrote with a good friend of mine, Samantha Connell, about how confusing it is and how we have all these resources and it still doesn't fully make sense. So yeah, the ISRP is a great resource, and our journal does have a lot of articles about that topic.
Yeah, and I think it's a very confusing topic. And I think the good thing is that even if we have global differences in fit testing, it's not that different when we compare APFs. So fit testing is much more in line globally than APFs are. I think that's a positive thing. And I think the biggest difference in fit testing is the different value of legal implementation across the countries.
Agreed.
Process of fit testing.
So doing the fit testing and then also doing it well, right? You know, I think that's one thing that gets a little bit overlooked sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. And this is exactly why we wanted to focus with multiple sessions. One general, what are the methods, and then taking a look at every method in depth in a single webinar, because proper doing fit testing is what is important. Yeah, and that's what we want to cover with this series.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any further questions or remarks in the chat. Looking at the time, we certainly used the half hour, even if we started a half hour late. Again, apologies for that. And hope to see you in 2 months' time. And please do share in your network that this series is taking place. And by the way, for those who are interested in respiratory protection, next week, Friday at 11:30, there is another series of mini webinars starting, focusing on the respiratory risks, mainly in the construction industry or in the construction sector. So a lot about dust and everything around that. Again, it's the first one next week, so it will be an introduction, but then we will dive into silica, asbestos, and many other issues. And for those with a wide interest in health and safety at work, on the 2nd of February at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Brussels time, we have a webinar on skincare. So completely different topic, but still might be of interest for all of you. So do check our page on LinkedIn. We always have the information there, and also on our website, you will find under the events page the different webinars and other activities. So thank you again, and hope to see you soon. And have maybe a bit early, depending on where you are, but still, I wish you all a very nice, relaxing weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you. Bye.